The alarms began with a low, pulsing hum, not the sharp tone of fire drills or weapons tests, but something deeper, meant to sink into bone. Every cadet in the academy knew that sound. It meant something had escaped. Within minutes, squads of security flooded the halls, scanners glowing, boots striking like war drums. Cadets were shoved against walls, their bags ripped open, desks overturned. Instructors barked for order, but their voices barely carried over the crackle of radios. The missing ones weren't ordinary creatures. They were predator cubs, offspring of a species whose adults had once reduced armored battalions to shredded steel. Losing them wasn't just dangerous. It was a diplomatic disaster waiting to ignite. If the parents arrived for inspection and their young weren't accounted for, the academy wouldn't survive the fallout. Doors banged open one after another as teams searched every classroom. Chairs scraped, wings folded tight, claws clicked nervously against the floor. Cadets whispered in fear. If the cubs feel cornered, they'll kill whoever has them. Then the door to room 17 slammed open. "Hands visible! Stay seated!" a guard barked. Weapons swept the room, pupils darting from one terrified face to another. Every cadet froze, mandibles rigid, spines bristling, eyes wide. All except one. At the back of the room, the human boy sat quietly at his desk, shoulders relaxed, expression unreadable. Draped across his lap, half buried in the folds of his uniform hoodie, were the missing cubs. 3 of them, fast asleep. Their claws flexed lazily against his chest. One snored, muzzle tucked under his arm. Another twitched in a dream, curling tighter into his side. The room went silent. Even the guards lowered their weapons a fraction, stunned. "That's impossible," a cadet whispered. "They kill anything they don't know." Yet the cubs didn't stir at the shouting, didn't bare fangs at the armed soldiers. They purred. They dreamed. And the human, as if nothing about the moment was extraordinary, simply rested his hand on the smallest one's back, steadying its breathing. Security didn't dare touch them. Because whatever instincts ruled these cubs, instincts sharper and older than any training program had chosen the human. And the unspoken truth in the air was clear. If the young trusted him, what would their parents see when they arrived? 10 hours earlier, the cubs had vanished. It began in the Predator Kennel, a subterranean facility built to contain apex species too dangerous for open training. The cubs were being held under strict protocols: heat regulation, scent masking, biometric barriers keyed to their specific neural signatures. Triple reinforced enclosures with pressure-locked doors and vacuum-sealed food delivery systems. And still, they escaped. At 0203, a breach occurred, not explosive, but intelligent. The enclosure's environmental readouts were looped for 5 full minutes. When the guards checked in person, the cubs were gone. No alarms, no sounds, just 3 empty dens, paw prints leading into the ventilation system. They were Corellian apex-born, not yet shoulder height, but strong enough to rip through carbon weave with a bite. Their species lived in tightly bonded packs, trained from birth to assess threats with terrifying speed and precision. No adult Corellian had ever bowed to another species. And no cub had ever wandered without its kin. Within an hour, the academy was locked down. Security scrambled to track them. They swept dormitories, cross-referenced infrared signatures. Nothing. Corellian young could reduce their thermal output to ambient levels. Their biology defied most scans. By the 3rd hour, instructors stopped trying to calm the cadets. The stakes weren't disciplinary. They were existential. Cadets whispered in tight knots, stories of the cubs from their homeworld, of how they once tore apart a training cohort after a handler tripped into their enclosure, of how Corellian mothers marked their cubs with chemical scent that triggered rage if removed or altered. "Whoever has them," one cadet whispered, "they're already dead." Rumors spread fast. Some claimed the cubs had slipped into the mechanical levels and would chew through power conduits until they exploded. Others said they'd stowed away in a shuttle bay and were already halfway to the orbital ring. No one expected to find them in room 17. Especially not like this. The moment froze in place, the guards in the doorway, the cadets wide-eyed, the room eerily quiet except for the faint, rhythmic purring coming from the human's lap. His name was Noah Carter. He was a second-year xenobehavioral cadet, unremarkable, human standard grades, no combat record, no neural implants. The sort of student who went unnoticed, except when mocked. No claws, no armor, no psychic enhancements. A soft-skinned Terran, surrounded by species who could split titanium with a shrug. Noah didn't flinch. He kept his palm steady on the middle cub's back, rubbing slow, even circles. The creature's tiny ears flicked at his touch. Its breath came steady, relaxed. The guards looked to the instructor at the front of the room, Commander Arlek, a rigid-skinned Methex with stripes of age along his forearms. His jaw opened slightly, then shut. He stepped forward. "Noah Carter," he said carefully. "Do you know what those are?" "Yes, sir," Noah said. "Predator cubs, Kirelian." "You know they're missing?" Noah nodded. Arlek took one more step. "And yet you didn't notify security?" "They were asleep," Noah replied. "Didn't want to wake them." A choking noise came from a cadet near the front. Arlek held up a hand. "Carter, where did you find them?" Noah adjusted slightly in his chair, careful not to disturb the smallest cub that had crept up to his shoulder and was now curled against his collarbone. "I didn't," he said. "They found me." It was not the answer they expected. One of the security officers stepped closer, raising a scanner. "Permission to scan for aggression markers?" Arlek hesitated. Slowly. The scanner passed near the cubs, lights sweeping across their fur. It buzzed once, then twice. "No spikes," the officer muttered. "Cortisol low. All three are deep in REM." That shouldn't have been possible. REM sleep in Corellian cubs only occurred when they were entirely safe, when surrounded by scent-marked kin or inside their mother's protected den. Noah wasn't kin. He didn't even have the right scent profile. And still they slept. The officer looked at Arlek. "Sir, if we try to move them now, we could trigger a defensive reaction. And if we don't, the parents will be here in less than 12 hours, Arlek said, voice taut. "We need a containment solution." Another instructor entered behind the guards. Dr. Enlai Mercer, Xenopsych specialist. Her eyes landed on the cubs, then on Noah. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then, quietly, "Don't move him. Don't move them. Get a full environmental scan and send for the behavior team." Arlek frowned. He can't just sit there forever. Mercer stepped closer, crouching beside the desk. She looked up at Noah. "They came to you," she said. "Do you understand what that means?" He looked down at the cubs. One of them snorted and pressed its nose against his stomach. "I think so." "Do you know why?" Noah met her eyes. They were scared. And somehow, against every instinct they were born with, they had found him. The soft one. The human. The one who should have been prey. And trusted him, anyway. The lockdown didn't lift. Even after the cubs were found, even after the scanners confirmed their vital signs were stable, even after half the security team stepped back in disbelief, the academy remained under full containment. Not because the threat was unresolved, but because it had changed shape and no one knew what it meant yet. What did it mean when predators too young to form bonds had chosen an outsider? What did it mean when the one they chose was human? Security swarmed the upper halls, still sweeping for any sign of biological residue. Protocol demanded a full lockdown remain in place until verification came from both behavioral labs and the species delegation already en route from the homeworld. The message had gone out 20 minutes after the cubs disappeared. Now it couldn't be recalled. Worse, it didn't include a solution. Just a warning, cubs unaccounted for, stand by for incident report. Which meant the adult Corellians, the mothers, the pack leaders, the ones whose names the academy didn't speak aloud, were already coming. Cadets in the upper dorms hadn't heard that part. They only knew the search continued, and that it was getting more aggressive. Every corridor buzzed with energy that felt more like fear than tension. Hall lights dimmed to reduce stress loads on the predators, but it made everything feel enclosed, claustrophobic. Even the walls seemed to hum with anxiety. In dormitory, Sector D, 2 students clung to their bunks while guards flipped mattresses. "They'll check blood traces," one cadet whispered, a thin-framed vulnary with bioluminescent spots. "If they think we touched the cubs, it won't matter if we gave them back." "Don't speak like that," hissed her roommate, voice tight. "If they hear you, they don't need to hear. The cubs will know. They can smell a lie before you even open your mouth." Down the corridor, a third cadet stared at his locker, now gutted by inspection. His belongings spare uniform, hygiene gear, 3 family hollows scattered across the floor like trash. He bent to pick them up, pausing when his fingers touched something wet. His hand jerked back. Just a nutrient pack. Ruptured when they tore the seam, but the panic in his eyes didn't fade. The fear wasn't just about punishment. It was about the unknown. No one wanted the cubs, no one had tried to steal them. Every cadet knew the stories, how even Corellian infants were born with full dentition and the strength to disembowel a careless handler. How they didn't imprint like other species. Their trust was earned through scent and suffering, not kindness. They understood only one kind of safety, dominance through survival, which made it worse. Because no one had seen Noah survive anything. He didn't stand out, didn't argue, didn't spar in training matches or throw his weight into zero-grav brawls. He read quietly at meals, sometimes eating alone. When instructors mentioned resilience or adaptability, they didn't point to him. He was invisible. So why had the cubs picked him? In the command wing, the briefing room was filled beyond standard capacity. Security officers, xenopsychologists, bioengineers, and 4 instructors sat clustered around a projection of the current situation. At the center, frozen in the still image, was Noah Carter. 3 cubs curled across his chest and lap. One had its head tucked under his arm, another clung to his hip like a latching pup. The third had flattened itself over his thighs, tail wrapped like a loop. All 3 were in deep sleep state. Their neural scans confirmed it. Dr. Mercer pointed to the data. "This isn't random behavior," she said. "These are classic signs of den association. They've imprinted on him." Arlek scowled. "That isn't possible. They were in containment their entire lives. The imprint window closed weeks ago." "The window can reopen under threat," she said, "and we know they were afraid. Their neural telemetry before the breach was spiked. Something scared them enough to override their environmental bond conditioning." "So why him?" another instructor asked. "There's no precedence. He has no bond training, no hormonal cues, no pheromone simulators. He doesn't even like animals." "I asked him that," Mercer said. "He didn't give a theory, just said he wouldn't hurt them." A long silence. Then a voice from the back, Lieutenant Havers, ex-military and one of the few human staffers at the academy. "I know that look," he said, nodding toward the image. "Seen it twice before, once during an evac, once in combat rescue. That's not someone trying to make himself look strong. That's someone who isn't afraid to be soft when it matters." Arlek turned. "And that's relevant how?" Havers didn't blink. "Because apex predators don't need strength. They need stability. Fear is chaos. But someone who won't panic? That reads as safety, especially when everything else is falling apart." Mercer nodded slowly. "He was calm when we found them, more than calm present. He knew what he was doing. Not the theory, but the need. He kept his breathing steady, didn't shift too much, didn't raise his voice. He even slowed his heart rate. The monitors picked it up." "He's not a trainer," Arlek muttered. "No," Mercer agreed, "but he doesn't have to be. The cubs chose him. That's the only metric that matters now." In room 17, the lesson had long since ended. The cubs hadn't moved. Noah remained seated, shifting only to adjust his back. His left shoulder was beginning to go numb from the weight of the largest cub, and his leg had started to cramp beneath the smallest, who'd looped its claws into the fabric of his uniform pants and refused to let go, even in sleep. Still, he didn't move much. "Can I at least get some water?" he asked finally. One of the guards blinked, startled, then handed him a bottle with exaggerated care, as if proximity might trigger an eruption of fangs and claws. Noah accepted it with a nod, took a small sip, and set it down beside the desk. "You okay?" the guard asked, low. "Fine," Noah said. "Just stiff." "You know what they are?" "Yeah." "Scared?" Noah considered. "No, just trying not to mess it up." The guard didn't answer. He couldn't, because nothing in his training had prepared him to see apex predator cubs wrapped around a human like blankets. Or the way they sighed in their sleep, like they'd finally found what they'd been looking for. Above them, the landing beacons flared to life. The Corellian delegation had arrived. The transport vessel didn't dock like civilian shuttles. It descended. The Corellian delegation's ship eclipsed the sun as it settled over the southern hangar, massive and silent, the entire hull coated in chromatic scale armor that shimmered between black and deep scarlet. No landing gear extended. The vessel simply locked itself to the reinforced pad through magnetic stabilizers and released a burst of superheated vapor that carved new scars into the platform's surface. No one greeted them. Not because of disrespect, but because protocol forbade it. You did not approach Corellian Apex Mothers. You waited. Inside the operations center, the head of security, Commander Varan, a veteran of 3 interspecies conflicts, stood watching the overhead feed with a tight jaw. He glanced at Mercer. "How long until the cubs wake?" "No telling," she said. "They're deep in the restorative cycle. Could be another 2 hours." Varan exhaled slowly. "We don't have 2 hours." He turned to Arlik. "Escort the delegation to room 17. Now, they'll want to see for themselves." Arlik looked stunned. "You're not preparing an observation deck?" "There's no time. They'll smell their scent on the air before we can run interference. We let them see it play out full context." "And if it goes wrong?" Varan's voice dropped. "Then we evacuate the block and call it a loss." The Corellians didn't walk. They moved like liquid muscle low to the ground, coiled but controlled, the kind of stillness that predators used right before they struck. 3 of them entered the corridor, 2 flanking adults and 1 massive matriarch at the center, nearly the size of a powered exosuit. She bore scars that shimmered silver under the lights, old and well-earned. No one breathed in their presence. Her eyes, a molten copper, swept the hall like a sensor array. When she reached the security checkpoint, she paused. Her nostrils flared once. She turned her head. Straight toward room 17. The guard stepped aside. She didn't need an introduction. She could smell her cubs. Inside the classroom, the room went still again, not from security this time, but from something older. Noah had already shifted to support the smallest cub against his side, its claws still latched to his hoodie. His right hand lay lightly across the largest cub's flank. His fingers moved slowly in a rhythm that matched the cub's breathing. He didn't look up when the door opened. He felt it. 3 shadows filled the doorway. The cadets nearest the front row couldn't help themselves. They shrank, physically, shoulders folding in, spines locking. Every survival instinct they had screamed to hide, to run, to submit. But the cubs didn't stir. The Corellian matriarch stepped inside. No one stopped her. She took 3 slow steps into the classroom, claws silent on the tile, her massive head tilting ever so slightly as her eyes locked onto Noah. He looked back and nodded. Not deeply, not as a gesture of dominance, just acknowledgement. A simple human movement that said, "I see you." The matriarch lowered her head. She sniffed the air once, then moved closer, no more than 2 paces from the desk now, close enough to kill. Close enough to see the faint marks on Noah's hands, where the smallest cub had nipped him earlier, not hard enough to break the skin. The matriarch looked down. Her nose touched the smallest cub. It twitched in its sleep, then nuzzled tighter against Noah's chest. The room held its breath. Then the matriarch leaned closer, slow, deliberate, her massive snout pressed against Noah's wrist. Not roughly, not threatening, a scent examination. The kind done by pack leaders. She held there for several seconds. Noah didn't move. Then, softly, she growled, not a warning, but something else, a sound low in her chest, vibrational. The smallest cub woke. Its eyes blinked open, pupil slits widening and narrowing as it processed the room. It saw the matriarch, then looked up at Noah. And instead of climbing down, it licked his jaw. Soft, affectionate. The matriarch made the same sound again. The cub stayed where it was. The matriarch turned to the others, her own delegation behind her, and gave a single flick of her tail. A signal. The threat had passed. Outside the room, the tension broke like glass. Security officers slumped against the walls. A few cadets simply sat down where they were standing. Even the staff on the command deck released the emergency override. Lights returned to full brightness. The academy was safe. But no one felt triumphant. Because something else had happened. Something older than protocol. The Corellian matriarch stepped back and let her 2 companions enter. They moved to the desk with care, making soft vocalizations to the cubs, who stirred lazily now, stretching, yawning, not alarmed but curious. One of them, the middle cub, finally shifted, pawing at Noah's chest. He gave a quiet, "easy now," and lifted his arm. The cub slid down, claws clicking softly against the desk, before it turned and rubbed its side against his hand like a house cat. The matriarch watched, then did something none of them expected. She dipped her massive head once, a gesture of recognition. Then she turned and left the room without a word. The delegation followed. Only the cubs lingered, still milling about the desk like sleepy children refusing to leave a warm bed. The aftermath came in waves. First, observation. Every second of the classroom interaction was analyzed, recorded, and run through cultural filters. The matriarch's scent pattern had confirmed it. She recognized Noah's presence as protective, not intrusive. Second, debrief. Noah was taken to the xenopsych lab, but not interrogated, just asked questions. Calmly, repeatedly. Did you feed them? No. Did you follow them? No. Did you call them? No, I just sat down. What were you doing before they arrived? Noah blinked. Reading. That turned out to be true. Security footage from outside the classroom showed him entering 30 minutes before the cubs did, alone, unarmed, sitting with a datapad. The cubs came in through the vent 10 minutes later, crawled out, saw him, and climbed into his lap. Word spread. Faster than truth, faster than analysis, faster than anything the academy could contain. Noah Carter, the human cadet with no claws and no training, had been chosen. By predators born to trust no one. And now, the cadets looked at him differently. Not with awe. Not with respect. With uncertainty. Because if the cubs saw him as kin, what would the adults see him as? The Corellians didn't stay long. After the cubs were confirmed healthy, after they nosed through their matriarch's fur, yawned, stretched, and showed no signs of trauma, the delegation departed. No demands, no threats, no speeches. They left in the same way they'd arrived, without announcement, without delay, and without permission. But something lingered. Not just the echo of their claws on the academy floor, or the faint heat signature their ship left in the hangar pad. Something deeper. Older. They left behind a word. Noah didn't hear it at first. It came through a data packet routed to Dr. Mercer, forwarded up the chain, translated through 4 layers of Corellian dialect, before a pronunciation file was embedded for human linguistics. Then the message was delivered. To him. No escort. Just a sealed data slate, placed on the desk of his room in the dormitory block. Inside, one line in standard. They have named you So-Tek Ven. Below it, a phonetic breakdown. So-Tek Ven noun. Corellian term, literally, one who shelters the bloodline. Connotation, den parent, scent-bound protector, kin keeper. No direct equivalent in galactic comment. Noah read it twice. Then once more. He didn't show it to anyone. Didn't bring it up in xenoculture seminars. Didn't tell the cadets who had watched him with widened eyes since the incident. He just folded the slate shut, placed it in his drawer, and went back to studying. But the name traveled without him. Cadets from predator species stopped challenging him in simulation drills. A few began greeting him with nods of respect, others with the careful stillness reserved for high-ranking pack handlers. Even those who had once mocked his softness now avoided speaking to him unless necessary, not out of cruelty, but caution. He hadn't changed. They had. Instructors, however, didn't shift so easily. Commander Arlek called him into his office within the week. Not disciplinary, formal, structured, cool. The meeting began with metrics: his attendance, his standing, his health vitals, his reaction to recent, unexpected events. Noah sat straight, legs still, hands resting neatly on his thighs. Do you believe this? Bond will affect your ability to serve in mixed-species command environments? Arlek asked, tapping the screen. No, sir. And if the Corellian government were to request your direct participation in their offspring's rearing or socialization cycles? I'd decline, Noah said. Arlek looked up. Why? Noah's answer came without hesitation. They chose to trust me. That doesn't give me the right to keep them. Arlek blinked slowly. For a moment, something shifted behind his ridged features. Not approval, not surprise. Recognition. The meeting ended with a nod. Noah stood to leave. But just as he reached the door, Arlek said, "The name they gave you, do you know what it means?" Yes. Do you believe you've earned it? Noah hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because it was the first time anyone had asked. "I don't think it's about earning," he said. "I think it's about being seen." He left without waiting for a reply. Academy life continued. The lockdown was lifted, the search protocols rescinded, the security team rotated back to standard sweep schedules. But something still hovered at the edges of daily life. The cadets had seen what happened. And so had the instructors. In cultural theory class, the subject of predator-offspring bonding came up. Dr. Enlai Mercer didn't reference the incident directly. She didn't need to. She simply asked the room, "What do you think defines trust for a species that doesn't believe in mercy?" Most students looked down. Noah didn't answer. Not because he was avoiding the question, but because he was still living the answer. A week after the delegation departed, a package arrived. Delivered by an unmanned courier drone, sealed in Corellian ritual markings. Security scanned it 6 times before allowing it through. It was handed to Noah under full observation. Inside, a strip of hide. Not synthetic, not decorative. Real. Tanned and marked with heat-stamped scent glands, Corellian clan signs, ceremonial identifiers of lineage. It bore the imprint of the matriarch who had stood in room 17. Attached was a translation. Token of recognition. He who shelters our bloodline walks with our scent. He may walk without fear. Noah ran his fingers over the hide. It wasn't a gift. It was a declaration. After that, the change became permanent. He was no longer just the human. He was Sotekven. The name spread beyond the academy, reached other institutions, other species. Delegations began referencing him in cultural briefings. A xenobehavioral field team requested his insights for predator response training, not because he was dangerous, because he wasn't. And that somehow was what made him matter. Not his strength. His stillness. His refusal to fear what everyone else did. And the Cubs? They didn't return. Not to the academy, not to the compound, not even in updates. Their departure was final. But their presence remained in the whispered way cadets referenced the incident, in the respectful silence that followed his name. Noah didn't become a hero. He became something older. Something quieter. Noah Carter didn't ask for the assignment. It came quietly, embedded in a routine logistics dispatch to his cadet inbox. Standard text, polite tone, just another field rotation, just another term of service. He almost deleted it before finishing the second paragraph. Then, he saw the destination. Arelin 3, Corellian Protected Territories. No formal orders, no obligations. But beneath the routing codes and security clearances was one line, set apart in smaller script. A quiet place waits for Sotekven. He didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. 3 weeks later, a dropship touched down just outside the Orelin perimeter and opened its ramp to thick, wild air. The planet wasn't hostile, but it wasn't welcoming either. Dense trees, sharp with photosynthetic bark, covered the foothills. Wind moved through them in a way that sounded like breathing, not human breathing, something deeper. Noah stepped onto the soil. He wore no armor, carried no weapon. Just a soft pack with field supplies and a weather-rated jacket strapped to his back. The academy had offered a guide, but he declined. The invitation had not been for an escort. It had been for him. And he was expected. The Corellians didn't build with metal. Their structures curved with the land, bone-grown walls, resinous supports, floors lined with woven pelts of extinct creatures Noah didn't recognize. No guards, no gates. But he wasn't unobserved. From the trees, he heard them. Soft pads over stone, clawed feet on wet leaves. No hunting posture, just movement. Watching, circling, smelling. He walked without looking back. The central den waited just beyond a ridge, its entrance framed with claw-gouged stone. The marks weren't ornamental. They were records. Histories told in scars and bite depth and spacing. No alphabet. Just memory. A figure met him at the entrance. Not the matriarch. This one was smaller, leaner, shoulders covered in ash-dyed fur, male, barely older than Noah. He sniffed once, then again. No words. Then a nod. And a step aside. Welcome. The Cubs weren't Cubs anymore. Not by Corellian standards. They were juveniles now half his height at the shoulder, sinew and speed, wrapped in fur that shimmered bronze and rust. They had grown, but not changed. At least not in the ways that mattered. The first one saw him before he entered the resting den. It didn't run. It walked, deliberate, slow, each step weighted like ritual. It circled once, sniffed the air, then pressed its forehead into his thigh. A greeting. The second appeared moments later, bounding from the shadows and leaping half into his arms before settling on its hind legs and lapping at his wrist. The smallest, now the most agile, clambered onto a low platform, growled softly, and launched itself at his chest. Noah braced, didn't flinch, didn't wince when claws scraped over fabric. The Corellians around them watched in silence. Then a low sound spread, not threat, not command. Acknowledgement. Noah didn't speak. He just sat down, carefully, letting the young ones pile over him in a tangle of limbs and tails and soft, weighty sighs. One of them pressed its head beneath his arm, like it remembered exactly where it had once slept. Which it did. They all did. He stayed for 6 days. Not as a guest. Not as a prisoner. As kin. The Kyrellians didn't ask him to prove anything. They didn't explain their customs or warn him of taboos. They simply included him. He was brought meat when they ate, given a mat lined with shed fur to rest, allowed to walk the perimeter with a juvenile at his side, not leashed, not guarded, walking together. On the third night, he was invited to the ancestral fire, a mound of blackened stones, surrounded by bone totems and flickering scent torches. There were no chants, no speeches, just silence. And then the matriarch appeared. She approached alone, moved like the earth shifted for her, and sat across from him. Between them, the 3 young ones, curled in sleep again, nestled against the stone. She did not speak. But after a long time, she extended a single talon and scraped a mark into the dirt between them, slow, intentional, a half curve with a point. The same shape that had been pressed into the hide they'd sent him. She touched her chest, then pointed to him. Not dominance. Not ceremony. Family. He nodded. Not because he understood everything, but because he understood enough. When he left, he didn't take anything. Not even a picture. He walked back through the trees alone, the morning mist rising like steam from the roots. The same juvenile, the one who'd once curled against his chest so tightly it had crushed the fabric of his hoodie, walked beside him halfway down the ridge, then stopped. Noah paused. Looked down. The juvenile tilted its head, sniffed once, then turned, and vanished into the trees. Noah exhaled, then kept walking. Back at the academy, he didn't say much. The instructors asked how the visit went. He said it was quiet, peaceful. The cadets whispered behind his back again, not with suspicion now, but with a strange mixture of fear and reverence. Some still called him Noah Carter. But others? They called him Sotek Ven, even when he wasn't in the room. Because names like that didn't fade. And neither did memories. Especially not the kind that curled up in your lap when the whole galaxy thought they'd tear you apart. In the Academy's deep archive, a new entry was added to the Xenobehavioral Studies log. Case Ref, Kier 421b, Sotek Ven event. Summary: unprecedented cross-species trust incident. Subject species: Corellian apex, juvenile stage. Recipient: Cadet Noah Carter, human, earthborn. Classification: stable imprint recognition. Risk status: none. Cultural impact: ongoing. Notes: if trust exists in instinct and instinct in trust, then this may redefine both. Noah never read the entry. He didn't need to. He had already lived it. And somewhere in the wilds of Orolin 3, 3 predators still remembered the sound of his heartbeat and the warmth of his lap, and slept easier for it.